Well, good morning. I'm Jeff Coleman.
And I'm Debra Pinkerton. Welcome to Morning Light and happy April Fool's Day.
No jokes on the air today, please.
Well, shouldn't you button your jacket?
Well, in just a minute, our Morning Light panel is going to tackle a big and challenging topic in the headlines today.
But first, here is a preview of what's coming up later in the show. Food insecurity is a real problem in Pennsylvania. A new study finds 2 in 5 children do not know where their next meal will come from. 1 in 3 live right here in the capital city of Harrisburg. Learn how the Midwest Food Bank is making sure no child goes hungry. Plus, we will tell you about an upcoming fundraiser, Baubles For Backpacks.
Are you going?
I would love to go.
Great. Well, over the weekend, President Donald Trump reignited a decades-old debate over term limits for presidents, saying he's not joking about the possibility of seeking a third term. The president told the host of NBC's Meet the Press, despite obvious obstacles posed by the 22nd Amendment, limiting the number of times a person can be elected president, he said there are methods for doing so.
Well, in April of 1947, Pennsylvania did become the 15th state to ratify the 22nd Amendment along party lines. Republicans in the state House and Senate supporting, Democrats opposing. This in the wake of wartime President Franklin Roosevelt's unprecedented 4 consecutive elections to the presidency. The GOP argued no man is indispensable. Democrats pointed to FDR's wartime leadership as the exception.
Are there exceptions when we have times that require a certain kind of leader or a certain kind of temperament, a special leader? Are there times when you change the rules? I'm not going to ask you.
No, the panel.
No, I'm going to ask the panel.
That's right.
But beyond the immediate argument about a Trump third term lies the bigger issue. Who, when, why should we place limits on presidents or governors or legislators or even mayors? And then maybe this, if biblical kings served upwards of 40, sometimes 50 years, and length of service provides a unique knowledge and experience, should there be any limits, any kind, beyond what the voters say is enough? What principles should guide our thinking about when to place limits on political power? We'll take this big question to the Morning Light panel this morning, and this is a panel that is especially equipped to answer this question, having a former Speaker of the Pennsylvania House, who I'll tell the world today is turning 50 tomorrow. So thank you for spending your birthday eve with us. And it is not a joke, you really are.
That is sad but true.
And how are you feeling?
Still 49.
Good. All right, good. So the question of political power, I don't know how you approached your speakership. Did you self-term limit? Did your caucus limit it for you? Have you wrestled with this issue of when is it the right time for a leader to step aside? Should it be structurally in the rules that say, look, you have this many years to get accomplished, and then, or are there circumstances that say, maybe there are certain moments in history like a war, economic distress, when a leader should stay on a little longer and the rules should be a little more elastic?
Well, I can talk about this personally because it's a decision that I had made. I recognized very early on in my career that you have a shelf life, particularly in those leadership positions.
What do you mean by shelf life?
Well, in terms of the decisions that you make and sometimes the gravity of them or the people that are impacted by them, in order to do the job well, you must be fully committed, and that takes a lot. And having served 10 years in a top leadership position, I knew going in that I would self-limit that, regardless of what the caucus wanted. In fact, I had some caucus members who were upset that I didn't seek another position, but that's what was best for me and my family, and ultimately I think it's what's best for the Commonwealth, because I can still share that knowledge with the current leadership team, and just in a slightly different role.
Is there something you know about you, about what power does to a person, even a good person or a well-intentioned person or a Christian person who's guided by principles about when you should limit that power?
Well, I think that we always have to be on guard for that, because it's easy to get consumed by the power and being important. I was never one who really got caught up in the titles. I was focused on doing the job well, and I think to do that well, we should all naturally place limits on ourselves.
Pastor Joe Green, so pastors, the king of Israel who served the longest, I think, was Manasseh. He served something like 55 years, and there's a long list of kings serving multiple decades. Pastors, people in leadership positions, good for pastors, but not for politicians? Or should there be term limits on both?
I'm
not presuming to know what your answer is on this question.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to really fight for term limits for pastors because then I may be out of a job soon. But I would say, if you look at man's natural proclivity, especially if you're a leader, for power. And so in order to execute what you probably believe to be your vision or your direction, you would naturally gravitate towards trying to accumulate more power. And we know the old phrase is power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so there always has to be a checks and balances that says that, hey, we got to hold you accountable. We have the law when it comes to politicians. As pastors, we have the Bible, and we also have our leadership. We always have to submit ourselves to be accountable, because if not, it could be very easy for us to get power hungry and get drunk and thirsty off the power and seek to solidify yourself as the ultimate ruler, or whatever the case may be. And so it's very important for us to be accountable. And like I said, a pastor, we have the Word of God. And so I always tell people, my congregants especially, to hold me accountable to the Bible. And if you see me getting kind of power thirsty or power hungry, then I have to submit myself to allow myself to be accountable and to humble myself in my leadership role.
Jeremy, do you disagree with anything these two men said? And is there something you add onto this when we're talking? And look, we're talking about President Trump because he raised the issue, but this is not a new issue, and it's an issue that many presidents, Dwight Eisenhower, a lot of people would have liked Dwight Eisenhower to have stayed on for a third term. He was the first one that became limited by this constitutional amendment. Presidency, limits, and then what about other offices?
Yeah, I think that the beauty of our system is that we've set up a system where we have Supreme Court who, they stay on for life. We have a Senate who only have
But some people say the Supreme Court should have limits on their tenure as well.
Right, and I think usually what happens is when you like the people who are there, you tend to say, maybe we should keep them a little longer. When you don't like the people who are there, you do the opposite. There was people during Obama's administration who said, gee, this guy, we really like him. Let's keep him around longer. And I think what's happening here is President Trump hears his constituents who really love him saying, boy, we wish you could be here forever. And he says, that sounds kind of nice. These guys love me. And he loves to talk about how people love him. And so that makes the press ask questions. They get into these conversations. And so that's where we end up.
So why limits in the first place? So why, are there biblical principles at play here? Is there any way that, as Christians enter this debate, we can avoid the traps of being sensational or even political about this, but think, all right, as a rule of thumb, here's where we should be? Yeah,
well, let's go historical. Outside of the kings from the Old Testament, Cincinnatus, a Roman general, he was a farmer. He came, he did some good things for Rome and was very successful. People wanted him to become the emperor, and he said, you know what, no, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to farming. George Washington took that type of, and that's where we get the city of Cincinnati. He took that example and said, people wanted him to be the king. He said, you know what, I'm just going to do those 2 terms. People started following that example. So are there arguments for why people should stay longer sometimes? Sure, there's times. But in our laws, we've set forth a pretty good system. After the 4 terms during World War II of one president, said, let's keep this to 2. Let's follow George Washington's example. Different areas of government, we create the rules slightly differently, but all of that working together generally creates a system where we prevent absolute power from corrupting absolutely.
Your advice to a leader who is looking at staying maybe a little longer, not handing over the reins to the next generation, about the idea of being indispensable, about being a leader that, look, I'm right at the peak of my experience. I have just enough money in the bank that I don't have to have this job. I'm the perfect kind of person. But there's a generation chomping at the bit that says, I want to be in there. I want to make my contribution now. How do you make these decisions about when to stay, when to go?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that you can still share all of your experiences and really mentor the next generation. I think that's something that as public servants sometimes...
Are you doing some of that now?
I am, yes. And I think it's important because you do have the experience, but yet you don't have the pressure of the position. And I think that there's something very unique and good about setting the rules ahead of time. When you go in and you know what, in the case of the president, it's 2 terms or whatever that is, the rules will outlive a person that you either agree with or don't agree with. And that level of consistency, I think, is important because there's still a role to play. You can see former presidents advising current presidents.
Sometimes with more influence
than
their public influence.
Yeah, I mean, look at President Jimmy Carter. I think many people would argue that his after presidential life was much more impactful than his 4 years of presidency.
I think many presidents would trade that reputation to get.
Yes.
Yeah.
And not having to run for re-election actually liberates you to make the decisions that are truly best for the country and not what will get you reelected. And I think that's another important piece of that puzzle.
You advise young leaders, young men especially, all the time who are looking at running businesses or churches and they want to be in a position of power. What are the warnings you give to them about the seductions of power and the limits they need to place and knowing themselves?
Yeah. Well, I always say that in order for you to be an effective leader, you have to have a vision. You have to have some direction that you think you want to go into. And then you understand that the people that support you in that vision are just as important as the leader. You just may happen to be the visionary. So when you think about the vision and you think about the collective as being more important than you as an individual, you're just the vessel that is being used in that particular moment. But if we stay focused on the vision, we realize that every single person that's part of our team is just as important as the rest, then it should keep us humble, because at the end of the day, I was put in office as a pastor, I would say, by God. And so I'm accountable to him first and foremost, and then the people he has us to serve. And ultimately, as long as we understand that we're just servants and we're not kings, because there's only one king and his name is Jesus, as long as we stay focused on that, we'll do well.
Don't mess it up, okay?
Don't mess it up.
You're doing great. Jeremy, we're going to take you tomorrow. We're going to be with you from the steps of the Supreme Court tomorrow, getting a little update on what you're doing there. The longest serving monarch of France, by the way, 72 years, King Louis XIV. So, you know, he left his mark, right? Yes. Especially on furniture. But thank you for this discussion. I think it was helpful. I know there are a lot of young leaders out there who want to know how to do it right and how not to mess it up, to live with integrity and be able to finish strong. So thank you for the wise words today. Great. Well, coming up on Morning Light, feeding children is a priority for the Midwest Food Bank. Last year alone, the organization fed some 332, get this, 1,000 people with the help of partner agencies. 123,000 were children. How the Midwest Food Bank is making an impact across the state and worldwide. You're watching Morning Light right here on Lighthouse TV.
The Midwest Food Bank is a volunteer-based national food bank. The goal is to share the love of Christ by alleviating hunger and malnutrition and providing disaster relief. Joining us is Kathy Anderson-Martin, Executive Director of the Midwest Food Bank. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Remind us again about the Midwest Food Bank.
Well, Midwest Food Bank has 10 locations throughout the United States and in Kenya and Haiti as well. Our Midwest Pennsylvania warehouse is in Middletown, was established late 2020, and we provide food to nonprofit partners, over 200 here in central PA and surrounding areas, to provide the food to people in need, which over 300,000 last year.
Oh my goodness. Now, we have heard that there have been reports that there's an increase in food insecurity here in Pennsylvania. Tell us about that.
There's absolutely an increase in need. Last year, we distributed $26 million worth of food versus 18 the year before. And this year, the first quarter, where our distribution is up 44%. And we distribute all food free of charge. So we make those resources available so our partners can help more people as they're seeing those increased service needs.
And what are some of the nonprofits telling you that you support?
Well, they are facing kind of a double whammy. They're seeing more people who need their services, who need food, but most food banks actually charge the agencies for the food they receive. Midwest does not. So they're seeing those fees increased while their costs to just do business because of the increase in beneficiaries. So they're being, hit from all ends. So that's why they come to us needing more resources to help more people.
We were talking earlier and you mentioned a couple of stories. What are you hearing from families that are suffering?
Well, certainly more and more families are impacted with rising costs and those basic need costs, but especially children. And 37% of the people helped last year were kids. For instance, we had a guidance counselor contact us because a teenager kept showing up at the nurse's station and they weren't sure what was wrong. She kept wanting crackers. Well, they found out doing a little more deep dive, there was no food in the home and the girl was coming there for something to eat more than anything else. So those are the kinds of things that we see in here every day.
Oh my goodness. How do you weave your faith into what you do?
Well, Midwest Food Bank is a Christian food bank, and we do not participate in national affiliations that would compromise our mission, which is to share the love of Christ by alleviating hunger. And we don't have restrictions on our partners. So if a church food pantry accepts food from us, we hope that they then can share the gospel, pray with people, and even help them with other needs, whether it's self-sufficiency programs, addiction programs, after-school programs, and they can do so without restriction on sharing their faith. So it's a circle that impacts a lot of people in a lot of ways.
What type of response have you received?
We have been very blessed because we don't participate in those national funding affiliations that would compromise mission. Because we don't charge the agencies, we are primarily funded by donations from private individuals, companies, foundations that support our mission, support what we do, and have a desire to show the love of Christ through a meal.
And as far as getting support, we're going to be talking about something coming up in the next segment about a fundraiser that you're going to be having. So we do need to take a break, but we will be back in just a minute. So coming up next on Morning Light, Baubles for Backpacks, a fundraising event for Midwest Food Bank. We will hear from the featured speaker when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. In our last segment, you heard how the Midwest Food Bank is fighting food insecurity right here in the capital city of Harrisburg. Many of those battling food insecurity are children. Joining me to talk about the second annual Baubles for Backpacks event is Executive Director Kathy Anderson-Martin, along with this year's speaker, Chavah Redmond, who is Chief of Staff with Community Aid. And thank you for being with us, Chavah.
Thanks for having me.
And Kathy, why don't you first tell us about this fundraiser, Baubles for Backpacks. Love the title.
Well, we have a group of wonderful women volunteers who came up with an idea to have an event for women that would be fun, an opportunity to network, but also specifically raise funds to help kids and provide weekend food backpacks for children that might not otherwise have food at home. So it's a fun event. This is year number 2, and we're very excited to have it and to have a whole women, but some guys too.
Okay, yeah, it's certainly, we're looking at some of the pictures from last year's. It looks really wonderful. Everyone's dressed up. Chavah, you're going to be the speaker. Why don't you tell us about your message?
Sure. So my message is twofold, actually. It's, first of all, need never stops, and need doesn't discriminate. It can hit anybody at any time. The second piece of my message is, as Christians, we're called to act. So if you think about James 2, verses 15 through 16, just to paraphrase, if you see someone that is in need, they are hungry, they need clothing, and all you say is, well, I hope you find what you're looking for, that's not good enough. We are, as Christians, called to act. I myself know what need looks like, having as a child faced food insecurity, and as an adult, housing insecurity and food insecurity at the same time. So, you think you're doing the right thing, but it can hit out of nowhere. And if you don't have people that act on your behalf, you are taking a walk in the wilderness by yourself. So I know that it is so vital that we support places like Midwest Food Bank, and so I'm really looking forward to talking about how we can take need and act on it.
Share your personal journey with us.
Sure. So I'll be speaking about this, but in particular, the bottom of my husband's business fell out, which left us with one income that was not able to support our ability to stay in our home. So as I looked to get another position and get another job, I found myself having to sleep out of my car in order to do that. One evening, I was alone. I was in my car. I was at a campsite and crying because I was just broken at that point. But the people at the neighboring campsite acted. They came over, they fed me, they loved me, and we prayed together. So I know what it looks like when people move when you're in need.
Oh my goodness, I can't imagine going through that. Thank you for sharing that with
sure.
us. How did you get through that?
I got through that by a lot of prayer and a lot of support around me. I call it a walk in the wilderness because that's exactly what it was, and I wouldn't take it back for a second. You realize the strength of God, and you realize how you can be poured into and be made whole through the action of others.
Yeah, absolutely. When you speak at this fundraiser, what do you hope people walk away with?
I hope they walk away having acted. I hope they walk away with a newfound appreciation for what need looks like, that it doesn't discriminate, that it does happen to everyone. And I want to connect that need to that moment of action. At this particular event at Baubles For Backpacks, the Community Aid Foundation will be doing a match grant. So the more we raise at this particular event, the more money goes to Midwest, and the more of a positive impact they can have, and the more of Christ's love is going to be felt through Midwest.
Yeah, and I love what you said. You do have to take action. You have to not just say, call me if you need help.
Right.
Give them the help, provide the food, do something.
Right. Listen to that still small voice in your heart that says move, that says act, because that's God talking to you.
Oh, what a wonderful message. Kathy, how do you hope this fundraiser really helps the Midwest Food Bank?
Well, we have so many agencies that, again, are directly feeding children through backpacks, in-school pantries, and so forth. So that's what this event will support. And literally for every person who attends, every ticket, we can provide 40 kids with food for the weekend. For $1.79, we can provide food, basic food items for a child for the weekend. So that's the impact, and then that carries over. And as Chavah said, it's a great opportunity to come out and do something fun, but also make a real impact in the life of children.
Yeah, how can we pray for both of you?
Well, you know, we see that need. We see our partners. We always say pray for Midwest Food Bank, pray for our partners who are on the front lines, pray for those who are donating food, and just that we have the resources to be able to equip our partners to make a difference. And, you know, so there are a lot of people to uphold in prayer and to do it constantly. But I think that's a command, you know, pray constantly. And we covet and appreciate those prayers of people on our behalf and on behalf of our partners and ultimately the people who receive the food.
Yep. Well, thank you both for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful time at this fundraiser, and I'm sure your message will make a big difference for so many people.
Thank you. I'm humbled to share it.
Yep. So the Midwest Food Bank's Baubles For Backpack event is on Friday, April 11th from noon to 2 p.m. at the Willows at Ashcombe Mansion in Mechanicsburg. For ticket information, go to midwestfoodbank.org/PA. Stay with us. We're back right after the break. Welcome back. Every Wednesday this month, we are teaming up with ABWE, Association of Baptists for World Evangelism, to bring you Witness Wednesday. This is a segment on how Christians can walk beside those with different religious backgrounds. Tomorrow, we are focusing on how we can minister to Hindus. We will meet a man who converted from Hinduism to Christianity. And that's a look at what's coming up tomorrow on Morning Light. Now, Jeff, your closing thoughts.
You know, I'll just say, Debra, that Witness Wednesday is going to be fascinating because as you go through all of these different people groups who are moving, in many cases, to Pennsylvania from all over the world, that faith conversation is something that we just sometimes stop and don't have. And so I'm glad we're talking about it.
That's right, and you really don't know. I mean, in today's society, you meet all different kinds of people every day just by going
Meeting
to the
people where
grocery
they're
store.
at.
So how can you, meet them where they are at?
And not be intimidated. That's right.
That's right.
Well, thank you, Debra. Looking forward to that conversation. Well, on April 1st, 1856, that's a few years ago, tickets were printed for the annual Washing of the Lions at the Tower of London. There was, of course, at one time a menagerie of wild animals kept at the Tower, fascinating place. But on that particular April Fool's Day, there were no lions to be washed. Now, history doesn't tell us who actually showed up at the gates that spring day to claim their ticket. But there is the ancient book of wisdom, Proverbs, much of it flowing from the mind of a man named King Solomon himself, who says, there is only one way we can avoid playing the fool today and every day. Here's what it says, word for word. It says, a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. Are you there? I'm there many days. Today there are so many things we just don't understand, responding to the news, responding to the conversation we had on this program today, but somehow we have opinions on the ready. I'm right there with you, guilty of using the fire, aim, ready opinion delivery method. But for you and me, April Fool's Day is as good as any other day to count to 10, hold our tongues and our typing fingers and thumbs until wisdom kicks in. Good idea? That's no joke. For Debra and the entire Morning Light team, I'm Jeff Coleman. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to check on your neighbors. God willing, we'll look for you right back here tomorrow morning.